Hello everyone and welcome back to the Legend of Chess tournament on Chess24. It's the finals, and in the finals we have a match between Jan Nepomniachtchi and Magnus Carlsen. This is the first game of match 1. It just finished and we are about to show it. For some reason there's a B here where R should be. So let me just fix that. There we go. Just fixing that R. Alright, there we go. All better. So Jan with the white pieces opens with e4, and Magnus of course goes for the Sicilian. We have c5, knight to f3, d6, and now d4. And I haven't followed live right from the beginning, but someone mentioned on Twitter that Jan took like over a minute to decide on the d4 move. I don't know if it's true, but if it is, it's very interesting. Could be that he was deciding whether to go maybe bishop to b5 or something else. C captures, we have knight captures, knight to f6, knight to c3, and a6. Magnus goes again for the Najdorf variation of the Sicilian, and here so many moves are possible, but Nepo goes for could be the most interesting one, rook to g1, immediately preparing g4 and g5. And Magnus took some time here to decide whether he would defend this, where maybe to just play h5 to block it. Because if g5 you'll not be able to capture, the white will gladly give up the rook for 2 pieces, so that's not an issue. So here Magnus decides for b5. He allows the pushing of g4. We have g4 and bishop to b7 with a double attack on the pawn here, but Nepo says be my guest and just grab the pawn. And the problem with grabbing the pawn is that there is no problem in grabbing the pawn. However, there is, because after captures, and captures, let's say queen here and you go back or something like that, f4, Magnus would be up a pawn, but he would be playing basically against an engine, because Nepo has this analyzed at home and he knows every top reply, and well, Magnus will just have to spend a lot of time to refute every move, and in the end it could become a problem for him. So instead of grabbing the e4 pawn, he just goes knight d7. He says, I'm not interested in your engine moves, let's play normal chess. With a3, stopping b4, and now g6 by Magnus, preparing to fianchetto the dark square bishop. We have h4 by Nepo, and bishop to g7. And here there is one game in the database where bishop to e3 was played, but here Nepo goes for h5, and it is already as of move 11 that we have a completely new game. So as you can see, Magnus fianchettoing his bishops, Nepo pushing g5, h5. The way modern chess is played. So knight to c6 with a double attack on the knight. Magnus just develops, and bishop to e3 defending. We have knight to c5, now with more pressure on the e4 pawn, and now f3, just defending that pawn. We have castles by Magnus. He says, I'm not worried about anything you're going to do here on the king side. If you push, I don't mind, I can just move the bishop, and if you capture, which is what Nepo did, Magnus captured with the f pawn. Usually you want to capture towards the center, but here opening up the f-file for the rook is quite significant, as Nepo's king is still in the center of the board. So here Nepo trades once. We have knight captures on c6, bishop captures, and the bishop to h3 now. Well, just asking black, what do you do here? And here Magnus decides to give up his strong dark square bishop to mess up Nepo's pawn structure on the queen side, and well, get rid of white's control over the d5 square. So bishop captures on c3, b captures, and e5 now. Sorry, first b captures and e5. I thought I captured. And now with complete control here of the d4 square, and you might have some ideas here of going knight a4, could have some very nice threats here. So here we have bishop to g4, now guarding the pawn, so the queen can move, and now queen to e7, developing the queen and connecting rooks. With queen to d2, and now rook a to d8. And now ideas like d5 are definitely coming. So Nepo stops it with c4, says I now have control of d5, but b captures on c4, and now queenside castles. And it's a very interesting position where probably best for Magnus is knight to a4. With the threat of just c3 is possible, d5 followed by queen captures, and a3 is possible. So white would have to go for something like queen b4, but then c3, and black would get a very nice position. However, Magnus goes for a different idea. He goes knight to e6, and here queen to c3, getting the queen away from the d file, and now bishop to d7. You could also defend the pawn with bishop to b5, but Magnus doesn't want to play passively. He even welcomes the idea of the c file opening up for his rook. So instead, he moves the bishop back, bishop to d7. As after the queen captures, there will be a double attack on the knight. So queen captures and king g7. Now just unpinning the king from this diagonal. Now the knight can move and queen back to b4. Now not allowing d5 or anything like that since the queen hangs. We have knight to f4 with some very interesting tricks here. Knight to e2 check, winning the rook. There's also an attack on the bishop here. So you have to decide what to do here. You're not quite in time to capture this pawn. So here we have bishop captures on f4. Nepo has to eliminate the knight, but now first the bishop captures on g4. And now we have rook captures on g4, rook captures on f4, rook captures and pawn captures. And and now not pawn captures, but rather an even better move. This was an automatic capture by me, but instead Magnus played queen captures on g5 first. He gets rid of the g5 pawn, the rook is pinned, you cannot move it, and you're going to capture it on the next move. So here rook captures on d6 by Nepo, and now queen captures with check. King b1, and now rook captures on d6, queen captures, and h5. Magnus starts pushing his passed pawn, and here we have an endgame where the material is completely equal, and it's a question whether Nepo's c pawn is faster than Carlsen's h pawn. So Nepo, of course, starts pushing at c4. You don't even care about the pawn, you want to get this pawn rolling as fast as possible. Magnus captures. It's a spur of the moment thing, I guess, when you decide to capture like this instead of just starting to push your pawn. But Magnus, I guess, realized that he will be able to stop this, and it never hurts being up a pawn in an endgame. So here a queen captures on e5, winning the pawn back. So Nepo also waiting with the pawn pushing. Queen to f6, and now you cannot trade queens. If you trade, then you all know the square of the pawn rule. If the king is not in the square of the pawn, of course the king will not be able to reach that pawn, and the king is 2 moves away from the square of the pawn. So black's pawn will be able to queen, whereas white's pawns will be easily stopped by the black king. So instead, after queen f6, we have queen d5 by Nepo, and now h4. Magnus starts pushing his passed pawn, and Nepo does the same. But now queen to f1 with check. King a2, slowly Magnus connects a few checks, queen g2 check, king to b3, and now queen g3 check, king to a4, and now that the king is on a very bad square, only now Magnus continues pushing his passed pawn. Nepo does the same. Like we said, it's a race between the h and the c pawn, and h2 now, preparing the queen. So, of course, queen to d7 check. Nepo starts checking the black king, king to h6, and now Nepo's only hope is to go queen d2 check, and after king moves, then continue checking the king, queen to d1 check, and so on. And if this works, then it works. If not, then it doesn't. However, Nepo tried a trick here, queen to d8. He said, okay, if you queen, I'm just going to play queen check here. You're going to move the king, and queen captures here. But there is a problem to Nepo's queen to d8 idea, so feel free to pause the video and win the game here for Magnus while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on noticing that the queen must be centralized. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's queen to e5. And this is just a beautiful move. Attacks this pawn, stops queen to h8, and most importantly threatens queen to b5 checkmate, as the king has nowhere to go from there. So Nepo, of course, cannot afford something like this, just ends in checkmate, so he has to do something. He goes for queen to h4 check, king g7, and now king to b3. You have to waste a move like this, and so you don't get checkmated. But now queen b5 check. And now the problem with going, for example, behind the pawn or something like this is that black can easily remaneuver the queen with a few checks to guard the h1 square. And now after you move the king, just bring the queen into the game. And now, of course, it's game over for white. So instead, queen c3 by Nepo, but now queen captures on c6 with check. King d3, queen d6 check, king e2, and now queen captures on a3. Again, a little joke for the end. Magnus says that if you capture, I just play queen a2 check and win your queen. So here we have king to f2, but now queen to b2 check, king to g3, and now queen to f6, offering a queen trade. Of course, Nepo cannot accept a queen trade. The a pawn is much too fast. So queen h3, but now as the king has been aligned with the queen, just queen to c3 check. And it was in this position that Jan Nepomniachtchi resigned the game, and the game 1 of the Legends of Chess tournament ends by Magnus winning, and Nepo now needs to retaliate to get back into the match. So here, of course, you resign because after captures, captures, and captures, it's 2-1 with the a-pawn being much too fast for White King to even start approaching, and of course there's no point in playing this. So after queen to c3, Nepo resigns, and game 1 goes to Magnus. So yeah, very interesting stuff. Nepo really did some nice preparation there with the rook to g1. Was a very exciting line, but then I think Magnus just annoyed him too much when he didn't want to go for this captures, because Nepo is a very exciting player. He always likes, when stuff is happening on the board, and he was hoping for this, but then Magnus just declined his offer, so politely, and then then it was a normal position where White was slightly better, but Magnus doesn't mind if you're slightly better. So yeah, once again, I do hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank John Hart, Arun Kumar Arumugam, Harshit Ghosh, Don Dugan, and Jeff Graves for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the Chess24 Legends of Chess tournament, checking up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.